Yeah, I'm a socialist, and so is he. Hi, this is Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And no, I'm not talking about Bill and I. I'm talking about Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Bernie was interviewed, I believe, on MSNBC, but it's hard to tell because he's everywhere these days. Let's see what it says. Chris Wallace on Fox News. Doesn't make any difference. And in this case, Wallace directly asked him about President Trump's accusation that Bernie Sanders is a communist. And Bernie basically said, well, of course, I'm not a communist. But then Bernie went on to do something interesting. He essentially said, yes, he's a socialist, but so is Donald Trump. And specifically, his quote was this: "The difference between my socialism and Trump's socialism is that I believe the government should help working families, not billionaires." What do you think of that, Bill? And I can clarify if you want.
No, I'm pretty sure I get it. Somebody pointed out to me just the other day that I've noticed that Bernie has not been attacking millionaires so much lately, mostly just billionaires. It's conceivable that it has something to do with the fact that this socialist is now a millionaire.
He's moving on up to the east side.
Yeah. So where do you start with all of this? First of all, from a sheer optics point of view, if Bernie's going to admit that he's a socialist, then I don't care who he accuses of being a socialist. I don't think anybody seriously believes that Donald Trump is bringing socialism to America, especially not after what we've been through in the previous 8 years, and especially compared to what the Democratic Party is offering. So if Bernie's best defense against the socialism charge is to say, yeah, Donald Trump is one too, then I say even better. The thing that's so annoying for people like Bernie and makes life hard for guys who've never really worked a job in their life to try and become president of the United States while selling idiot students on socialism from his three houses. The tough part about that for him this time around is that the economy is absolutely booming, and worse than that, much worse than the fact that America's doing well. America's doing well for the lower income levels than it is at any time really in recent history, perhaps in all of its history. That's a major problem if you're a socialist and a Democrat. The idea that poor people are working more, making more money, spending more money is a catastrophe for Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party. And so if it turns out that Donald Trump is making poor people richer, then all he's really got left is the old trope about, well, yeah, sure, the economy is good for those millionaires because they increased their profits by $5 million and poor people only increased their profits by $500. And any idiot who understands the laws of scale knows that this is not only it's not only natural, it's essentially unavoidable.
Well, he's not actually talking about the economy generically. He's specifically talking, as far as I can tell, he's specifically talking about the idea of redistribution, which is kind of the core of socialism. And he's basically saying, yes, his plan of Medicare for all, for example, or free college tuition, or a variety of other programs that he's proposed are forms of redistribution that could be branded as socialist. But so are corporate tax breaks. So is what would be called corporate welfare, or tax rates and ways of avoiding taxation that cause corporations to be disproportionately lower in a lower tax bracket than, say, an individual who would do the same thing, even an individual who owns his own business. And so he's basically saying, choose your socialism. We've had it for a long time. Do you want the kind of socialism that redistributes the public wealth into the hands of already wealthy people, or do you want the kind that helps the average Joe?
Choose your socialism. Yeah. You can have Venezuela or you can have Trump's America, but that point it's not like it's lost on Bernie. It's that it's an unwinnable point and he knows it. And so basically this is good news, actually, Scott. The only way that Bernie would have a chance with this whole socialism angle was if people were in real trouble, as if the country was really, really hurting. Last time we took a big dip into the socialism pond, from which we have not fully recovered, was during the New Deal when Roosevelt, through all kinds of progressive redistribution, make work programs at the Great Depression, extended it for 5 additional years. Nobody knows that, of course. Everybody talks about how Roosevelt saved the country, but all he did was take a serious depression and turn it into the Great Depression. So my point is this: if the American people are out of work and miserable and angry and worried, then you can perhaps sell them on this snake oil socialism thing. But they're not only not out of work and they're not only not out of money, they seem to be happy in record numbers. Something like 93% of Americans expect next year to be better than this. That's a death knell, not just for socialism, not just for Bernie Sanders. It's the death knell for the Democratic
and his argument,
Party.
Bill, seems to be that, the economy is doing better. And of course, Bill, of course, you know why the economy is doing better, because Donald Trump has simply continued the Obama recovery. But the reason,
needless to say,
what he's saying is now is the time to properly align our financial incentives and to properly distribute the funding when we're doing well,
correct,
not when we're in the tank like during the Great Depression.
Yeah. So let's just let me unpack that in just one second. The point I was trying to make earlier is that since he cannot make the case for socialism under the best of times, meaning the worst of times for the rest of us, now he's fallen back on the ancient socialist canard. Look, socialism is driven by 2 things. It's driven by envy and laziness. And now he's pulling the envy card because people are actually working. And the envy card says, billionaires are getting even richer. Yes, everybody else is getting richer. Yes, everybody else's lives are improving. Yes, everybody's working who wasn't working before. But the really, really bad part is there are rich people who are doing better than you are. And if you elect me, I will take their money from them and give it to you and keep a little piece of it for myself. So he's playing the envy card here. That's what this whole thing about Trump's socialism is for billionaires. Okay, fine. You know what, Bernie, we've heard it before. People are getting paid who weren't getting paid before. People who were getting paid before are getting paid more now. So we know what's going on with that. Now, what you're talking about here in terms of his idea is a very, it's a very, I don't want to say it's a clever strategy because it's certainly not. What Bernie basically is saying, according to your analysis, and I think you're right, is look, yes, things are booming now. Now's the time to soak the rich. Now that all this money's coming in.
I think he's essentially saying to do a really lousy metaphor, which I'm sure you'll then expand beyond belief and make it so that I look ridiculous using it. But what he's saying is there are crumbs falling off the table right now. And if you're a mouse, these are good times. But brother, there's a loaf of bread up there you don't even know about that you should be getting a slice, not just a crumb.
Let's just say that we're true. What Bernie's basically saying is, crumbs are falling on the floor because the rich have a big old loaf of bread on the top of the table now. So Bernie's answer is, let's get rid of that loaf of bread. And then the crumbs won't fall at all. This is a very, very biased view of essentially, it's not even trickle-down economics. It's just economics. What Bernie is trying to do is get your eyes off the fact that the people who create the jobs in this country are the people who own businesses, and they're doing well, which means their workers are doing well. So Bernie's got a problem. His workers are doing well. So therefore you have to go at the envy and you have to attack the fact that some people are doing better than others. And what he's basically saying is, if we take their money, they won't be doing well anymore. But everybody knows that if you take their money, then nobody does well anymore. And that's really what he wants. He wants a state of perpetual poverty because that's what socialism is. It's not a bug. That's a feature for these people. What he's really stuck with, Scott, is he's stuck with the fact that things are working and they're working well. And he's trying to convince people that things are catastrophic and that it doesn't work well. And I think the answer, if Bernie Sanders were to become the nominee, which I thought exceedingly unlikely, but possible, now it's looking like exceedingly possible. If he's to become the nominee, then Donald Trump has this guy finished, because the entire argument against socialism is that it is a con game that is sold to voters in the interest of equality, but really in the interest of greed. In other words, if you're all about wealth redistribution, it's because look, it's a very simple thing, really, honestly. It's a very simple thing. And as usual, it's a self-centered thing. That's why capitalism works. It's enlightened self-interest. But think about it in very clear terms. If you're for socialism, it's because you think that if socialism is enacted, you'll do better than you did before. You'll be able to take rich people's money and they'll give it to you. You'll do better under socialism. If you're opposed to socialism, it's because you feel like you will be giving up more of your own money to take care of other people who aren't working. So that's how you decide whether or not you're a socialist.
That would explain to me people at the bottom of the economic rung or close to it, Bill, but it doesn't quite explain why there are so many fabulously wealthy people who are supporting candidates, not just Bernie Sanders, but candidates who are in favor of such redistributionist schemes.
Sure,
and can I ask you to do something special here for a moment?
Sure.
What I would like you to do is just pretend that you've got a brand new listener tuning into this show. And to them, when they hear what Bernie Sanders is saying, it sounds like socialism means that government is what we do together to ensure equality and fairness. Now, can you explain to that innocent person who doesn't have any other preconceptions about it, why what sounds like such a beautiful thing is not salutary either for themselves or for the Republic?
Perfect. Take a look at the person who's bringing you the message. Look at the behaviors of the person that's bringing you the message. So in the case of this election round, it's Bernie Sanders. So let's look at Bernie Sanders. If Bernie Sanders felt that socialism, that equality, that income equality was really the most noble thing in the world. And that's what he's been telling you for the last 7, 8, 10 years, certainly this election cycle. He's been telling you that some people have too much, and we're going to take stuff away from those people and distribute it to other people. That's the message. So let's look at his behavior. If he believed what he said, he wouldn't own 3 houses. He has demonized other people for owning 3 houses. But the fact that he owns 3 of his own houses should be all the evidence and more that you need to understand that Bernie Sanders doesn't believe in socialism, because if he did, he would sell 2 of those houses, the most expensive 2, and he would take that money and he would go out into his community and he'd start to spend it on homeless people. If he believed what he was selling, that's what he would do. Donald Trump is selling capitalism. If you believe in capitalism, you amass as much wealth as you want to or you can. Donald Trump is putting his mouth and his feet in the same direction. He's doing what he says he believes in. Bernie Sanders is talking about wealth redistribution. He's a millionaire. He owns 3 houses. And the thing I would say to people who've never thought about this before, this is not unique to Bernie Sanders. I'll give you 2 other very, very, very clear examples. The champion of the people throughout the entire 20th century and into the 21st was Fidel Castro. Cuba was run by a corrupt dictator, and all of these American companies were making money off of the Cuban people, and the mafia was there and everything.
Before Castro came along.
Yes, I'm getting to that. So all of this corruption was going on. Fidel Castro comes out of the mountains in 1959. His name Fidel means truth. He launches this revolution of the people, a communist revolution. Batista, the corrupt dictator, is kicked off of the island. All private enterprise is kicked off the island. Everything is nationalized. And the Cuban people now own everything. For the next 60 years, the Cuban people suffer the worst case of poverty in the Caribbean. They are genuinely boiling rocks to make a thin kind of a broth. But they're doing this because they believe that we're all in this together. Fidel wears, army fatigues and he claims to live in a fisherman's hut. And you can see pictures of the fisherman's hut, which are broadcast on TV. And as long as they feel like, well, as long as we're all suffering together, then I guess it's better than doing what we were doing before. So Fidel Castro dies a few years ago. And we find out how much money he has in his personal bank account. And he doesn't have $6,000 or $60,000 or $600,000. Fidel Castro, when he died, had $800 million in his personal bank account. His personal bank account, $800 million. In Venezuela, they're no longer eating their pets for food because that ran out a long time ago. People ate the animals from zoos in Venezuela because they're starving to death. They did that a year ago, more. Now they're starving to death. They're doing anything to get out of Venezuela. That's because they got socialism. But here's the point. Hugo Chavez, who brought socialism to Venezuela, died of cancer not long ago. And his daughter, who has done nothing, she's the daughter of the former dictator, is worth $4.5 billion. She is worth $4.5 million because Hugo Chavez took the wealth of that country, claimed to redistribute it back to the people, but ended up giving it to his own daughter. She lives in a country where people are so hungry that they're eating their own pets and they're eating animals out of the zoo. And she has $4.5 billion. Now, if that's not enough to convince you that this whole thing is just a giant scam to get your vote by promising you things that you want, other people's stuff. You don't like it. It's still other people's stuff. If you think other people should be giving stuff to people in greater need, then take your iPhone and your computer and your Xbox, go down and pawn it and distribute it to the homeless people. If you really believe that wealth redistribution is a good idea, then convince me. Distribute some of your own wealth instead of waiting around for somebody else to distribute other people's wealth, other people's hard-earned money into your pockets. If you can't see that a Bernie Sanders who owns 3 houses and a Fidel Castro who has $900 million in his bank account and an Hugo Chavez who leaves his daughter $4.5 billion, and they're all talking about income equality, if you can't see that this is the most transparent form of con job, then I can't help you beyond this. If you can't see this, then there's something that is blinding you to the obvious reality. If Bernie Sanders believed what he said he believed in, he would live in a modest home, and the money that he made doing what he does, he would have donated to a cause. He would have distributed to food centers. He would have done something with it, not just because of the politics of it, but because he genuinely believed it. But he doesn't. He doesn't. He's playing all of you for suckers. He's a guy who has made his entire life by living off of other people. He married rich women and then divorced them. And he married another rich woman and divorced them. He's only been mayor of Burlington, Vermont. And how is it that this guy's gotten millions of dollars? I talked to somebody once about this, a Bernie supporter. I said, how can you explain the fact that this so-called socialist has 3 houses? And she said, well, Bernie does important work. Oh, let me make sure I understand this. So Bernie provides a value that he's being compensated for. And because he's providing greater value, he receives more money. And she said, yes. Where do you go from there? There's one important point that needs to be added to this. What he accused Donald Trump of, corporate bailouts and things like this, that's not socialism. That's the opposite of It's an opposite of socialism. Because if it was socialism, the companies would be willing to pay more money. They'd be wanting to pay more money. If Donald Trump were guilty of socialism, he wouldn't be, and he's not responsible for this anyway, I'll get to that in a second, but Donald Trump wouldn't be giving tax breaks to companies if he was a socialist. If he was a socialist, he would be eliminating tax breaks to companies so that they would pay more in taxes. What Bernie's talking about is mercantilism. It's sometimes called crony capitalism, but that's a bad name because capitalism has nothing to do with it. Mercantilism is where the government and big business get in bed to each other, and big business says, we will pay your political expenses and fund your campaigns, and in exchange for this, you will write laws that will either protect us from competition or protect us from high taxes. You'll give us loopholes that we can use. That's an investment for us. Yes, we have to pay for your political campaign, but that's small change compared to the amount of money we save because you're going to write laws that benefit us. That's not socialism. That's mercantilism. It's the grossest form of corruption, and it's exactly what happens when the government and business get in bed together. And I don't know a single conservative who's in favor of all of this. I don't know a single conservative who's in favor of things like corporate bailouts and in favor of things like corporate welfare. We believe just the opposite. We believe that this is what happens when government gets too involved in business and business gets into government. You mix up business and government. You don't get a better business and a better government. You have the business aspects of destroy the essential small virtue of small government. And then you have the government regulations and venality destroying the competitive instincts that should keep businesses honest. It's a catastrophe. So he's right about that. I would go hard after mercantilism, but it's not socialism. And certainly it's not socialism when it's coming from a guy who's a multimillionaire, who has 3 houses and is not willing to distribute his wealth to anybody. All he's done is take other people's money and hang on to it. And if you can't see that, then you're purposely not looking at it. And that's an emotional problem I can't help you with.
The members at billwhittle.com have voluntarily contributed their hard-earned dollars, redistributing this knowledge around the world, not by any government mandate, but because they were willing to do so, and they see in that enterprise their own happiness and the happiness of many others. We're going to be joining some of those folks aboard the Navigator of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean cruise liner that's going to be leaving the port of Miami on May 15th, sailing to the Bahamas, stopping for a day at Coco Key, a private island, and in the midst of all of that luxury and meals and drinks, we will enjoy casual conversation and laughter, as well as live productions of this show and our other show, Right Angle with Stephen Green. If you have not yet signed up for it, I'm sad to say there's not much time left for you to do so. So go to billwhittle.com right now. There's a picture of a big white ship right at the top of the page. Click on that and you'll get all the instructions you need to reserve your cabin. For Bill Whittle, this is Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.